Hey guys, what's up? I'm Erin and welcome back to the channel. So here's the thing. When you retire has a huge impact on just how much you need in investments to have a successful retirement. Because if you were to retire at, say, 55, you would need a vastly different portfolio than if you were to retire at, say, 70. And recently I did do a video on just this topic, going over how much you might need if you retired at, say, key ages like 55, 60, 65, or 70. But there's another piece to this puzzle that we can't ignore, and that's how spending changes and evolves throughout retirement. You've probably heard the general rule that you'll need anywhere from 55 all the way up to 80% of your pre-retirement income in order to have a successful retirement. But when we dig into the data, we see that spending doesn't stay flat. It evolves and changes over time. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, most retirees spend more in the early years, traveling, doing home renovations, and staying active. And then spending tends to dip in mid-retirement and then decline again later on. And yes, healthcare costs tend to go up later in life, and this is a concern for everyone, regardless of your net worth level, regardless of your income level. But what we see over time is that spending tends to decline in nearly every single other category outside of healthcare. So while healthcare costs tend to increase, we tend to still see a real decline in spending for retirees over time. In that original video, I used typical spending patterns to build retirement portfolios that you would need at various key retirement ages. Assuming retirement lasted to age 90 and aiming for a 95% success rate. I'll link that video here if you want to check it out. But there was an assumption I made in every single example in that video, and that was that it was a couple retiring, with both receiving Social Security payments. And I got a ton of questions on that video asking, can you do this but for a single individual? And that's a totally valid question because about a third of retirees over the age of 65 are single. So that's exactly what this video is for. Same structure, same concept, but this time we're building retirement portfolios for a single individual. And just a quick heads up, if you're single, it's very likely you may need a larger portfolio in order to have a successful retirement because it's very likely you have fewer streams of income. For instance, a household with 2 streams of income from Social Security can have a big buffer against how much they would otherwise need in investments to have a successful retirement. And as I tend to like to say, when you're coupled up, life tends to get more affordable simply because you're sharing expenses. So let's dive into retiring at 55 and claiming Social Security at 62 and what it would take to make a portfolio last to age 90. And since this is our first full example, we're going to go into a bit more depth and lay the full foundation. We're going to break retirement down into 4 distinct phases, each with their own spending level needs, each with their own investment assumptions, and each with their own drawdown needs. To calculate how much you would need, we're going to calculate the total withdrawals needed for each phase of this retirement portfolio. Then I'm going to calculate the present value or how much you would need invested today in order to make that portion of the portfolio successful. And then I'm going to add in a 15% buffer to ensure that this portfolio has a 95% success rate. Of course, if you retire earlier, you're going to need a larger investment portfolio to carry you through. And this first phase, age 55 to 61, is pre-Social Security. And at this point, the only source of income you're going to have is coming directly from your investments. So this is going to put more pressure on your investments during this time. Because of that, we're going to take a conservative approach, assuming 4% growth and a 3% withdrawal rate. Annual spending at this time is a bit over $83,000, and with no outside income, all 7 years are going to be fully funded by investments. That puts the portfolio need for this phase at about $600,000. Phase 2 is going to span from ages 62 to 64, and this is when Social Security kicks in and spending level is the same. We're going to assume our individual receives $1,200 a month or $14,400 for the year. That reduces your annual spending gap to just under $69,000. And at this time, I'm going to assume the portfolio is taking on a bit more risk. So I'm going to assume a 7% growth and a 5% withdrawal rate. For this phase, you'd need about $169,000. Phase 3 runs from age 65 to 74 when we see the first drop in average retirement spending. With Social Security continuing at this point, the portfolio still needs to cover around $51,000 per year for 10 years. That phase requires about $272,000 in today's dollars. And then in phase 4, from age 75 onward, spending drops again. At this time, your portfolio would need to fund about $39,000 per year, which adds up to roughly $142,000 for this 16-year period. When you add all 4 phases together, including that 15% buffer, the total portfolio needed would be about $1.2 million. Now let's do a retirement at the age of 60. This is still considered an early retirement, and we'll still have our individual claiming Social Security early. So let's build this portfolio. Phase 1, from age 60 to 61, happens before Social Security begins. So your entire income needs come from your investments. With conservative growth assumptions, you'd need around $188,000 to get through this phase. Phase 2 covers ages 62 to 64, when Social Security kicks in at about $14,400 a year, reducing your portfolio draw. You'd still need about $212,000 to fund this period. Phase 3 is going to be from ages 65 to 74, where we start to see spending decline and you're still receiving Social Security during this time. This 10-year stretch would require about $360,000. In phase 4, from 75 onward, spending drops again. After counting for Social Security, you'd need roughly $249,000 to finish out retirement. Add it all up, and you'd need a portfolio of about $1 million to retire confidently at the age of 60. What if we did another example where you still want to do an early retirement at the age of 60, but you want to delay claiming Social Security until full retirement age of 67 in order to capture a higher monthly benefit? At this point, we'll assume that our individual would receive $1,700 a month, or about $20,400 for the year. Phase 1, from age 60 to 64, covers the full annual spending of $83,000 entirely from investments. With a conservative 4% growth rate, you'd need about $444,000 to get through this period. Phase 2, from ages 65 to 66, spending drops slightly, but you're still not collecting Social Security just yet. You'd need another $119,000 from your portfolio to cover those 2 years. Remember, during these early phases, 100% of your income needs are coming from your portfolio. So that's going to put a lot of stress on your portfolio and your investments in your early retirement years. But by delaying claiming your Social Security, you're going to get a higher monthly benefit, and that takes a lot of stress or a lot of pressure off your portfolio in your later retirement years. So it's a trade-off of what you want to do. Phase 3, from ages 67 to 74, Social Security finally kicks in, covering part of your spending. With the reduced portfolio draw and a more aggressive rate of return of 7%, this phase would require about $250,000 in investments. And finally, Phase 4, from age 75 onward. Again, spending declines further, but you'd still need around $211,000 to support this phase of retirement. Altogether, that brings the total portfolio need at age 60 to around $1.02 million for a 95% chance of success. Even though delaying Social Security increases your monthly benefit, it still means you need more savings upfront. Here's why. When you delay claiming, you're relying entirely on your portfolio for a longer period of time. That means covering several extra years of full spending without help from Social Security, and it puts more strain on your investments early on. And while delaying benefits may not dramatically reduce your portfolio needed, or may not reduce it at all, it does shift the balance of risk and security over time. You may need a larger initial portfolio to bridge this gap to get you to Social Security, but once Social Security kicks in and you have a higher monthly benefit, maybe that gives you a greater sense of security going into your later years of retirement, if your medical expenses tend to increase or if you live longer than expected. So maybe having a larger portfolio now gives you greater peace of mind later. Now let's consider a very common retirement age of 65. and still waiting 2 full years to claim Social Security at full retirement age of 67. And again, we'll assume that this individual receives $1,700 a month. Phase 1 covers ages 65 to 66. Since Social Security hasn't kicked in yet, your entire retirement income will need to come from your portfolio. With a conservative growth rate of 4%, you'd need about $147,000 to get through this phase. Phase 2 runs from ages 67 to 74. At this point, Social Security is providing $20,400 a year, which helps to reduce the pressure on your investments. Your annual gap is just under $45,000, and with the same 4% growth rate assumption through the age of 69, you'd need around $333,000 to fund this phase. Phase 3 covers age 75 and beyond, when spending declines even further. You'll still need to draw about $33,000 a year from your portfolio after considering Social Security. With a more aggressive 7% growth rate, this final phase would require roughly $256,000. Altogether, to retire confidently at the age of 65, you'd need a total portfolio of about $736,000. As you can see, there's a fairly dramatic difference in portfolio needs if you retire at 65 as opposed to 60. And finally, let's do a delayed retirement at age 70 and claiming Social Security at the age of 70. By delaying claiming Social Security, our individual is now going to receive $2,100 a month, or a little bit over $25,000 a year. And by delaying the age at which they retire, they're going to have less years that they would need to fund in retirement, and they're going to receive Social Security from the very start of their retirement. In phase 1 of retirement, from age 70 to 74, your annual spending is about $65,000, and Social Security is covering $25,200 of that. That leaves a portfolio draw of just under $40,000 per year. With a conservative 4% growth assumption, you would need around $213,000 to get through this phase. In phase 2, from the age of 75 onward, spending drops to about $53,000 a year. That leaves a smaller gap of about $28,000 annually. And with a more aggressive 7% growth assumption, you'd need roughly $266,000 to cover this stage of retirement. Altogether, with a 15% buffer built in, you'd need a portfolio of about $479,000. Now, of course, none of these portfolios are perfect. They're meant to be a guide showing that when you retire and when you claim Social Security really shape what type of investment portfolio you need going into retirement. But the perfect portfolio is going to be one that reflects your lifestyle, your spending needs, and your vision of what retirement should look like. It's also really important to build flexibility into your plan for those unexpected twists that can come your way in life. Maybe you have an unexpected medical bill, a home repair, or maybe you just have to help out a family member. Retirement isn't just a straight line. Even if spending trends downward, real life rarely fits neatly into a spreadsheet. And if you're single, you may need to plan for a longer retirement, especially if you're in good health. And remember, taxes still matter, even in retirement. And if your budget is running a little bit leaner than you would like in retirement, part-time work is also an option. That can relieve a lot of the stress on your portfolio, and it can also help out mentally by keeping you stimulated and engaged with the community. Most of all, your plan should be flexible. Revisit it, adjust it, and let it grow with you. At the end of the day, confidence doesn't come from hitting a magical number. Instead, it comes from knowing you have a plan that works for you. So what is your plan going into retirement? Would you care to share whether you're single, whether you're coupled up? What age are you planning on retiring? Share your thoughts in a comment down below. I do read them all, even if I can't reply to all of them. And I post new videos every single week. If you got anything at all out of this one, please give it a like. If you're new here, please consider subscribing, or if you know of someone who might get something out of this type of content, please consider sharing. I'll see you soon. Bye. That was actually probably the quietest filming I've had since being here, and I think I still got interrupted like 40 times. Well, my notes are there. I could not possibly remember the number of numbers that go into this video. Oh, there's a lot. So also, we have Nina joining us for this video. He's quite unimpressed with retirement topics, as you can tell. He is alive, I guarantee it. Welcome back to this. I hate when I mess up on the first sentence. I uses. Sometimes you don't even think when you talk, you just talk, and hopefully it makes sense. Sometimes it doesn't. Security streams of income. No, we're not saying it like that. I hate referring to Social Security as income. I think it's upsetting because it's a benefit. It is an income, but it's not, and I want to be careful with that. You're going to need frickin' A, why do I mess up on like silly words? I swear, you sit down to talk to the camera, it's just like, I'm new to talking. It's like a baby giraffe learning to walk, except I'm short. I swear one day I will have a silent studio and you'll never hear a thing and I will never have to stop for anything until we get to that point. Someone talked over a megaphone. This is the worst place to live, but it's the best and I love it. Okay,